Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Bhagavatam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Sha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sagadanam Sadvaitam Savadutam Pariyasaitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Radha Sagana Shri Krishna Kamitam Sha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tadakarsha Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpartarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyascha Patinanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaurabhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, quick little recap. 1 month ago, we did the first half of the Bhagavatam for the 7th canto, and this entailed the rise of Hiranyakashipu, how he was able to achieve pseudo-immortality after the demise of his brother Hiranyaksha, and the ensuing destruction of the universe. And interestingly, somehow Hiranyakashipu was actually able to speak more or less the Bhagavad Gita to his relatives to appease them, only to attain the throne of the demons. You have then the advent of his son Prahlad Maharaj, who described the 9 processes of bhakti, and who defied his father's arrogance and atheism, up to the point where the Lord literally manifested himself out of a simple pillar in order to protect his devotee from harm. This is the very fun part of the 7th canto, where you have a lot of pure bhakti, you also have a lot of brilliant action, so it's a really good way to just really get yourself engrossed in the 7th canto and just absorb all the information that's in there. But the second half now really encapsulates the title of the 7th canto, the science of God. Because now it is more of a conversation as opposed to a narration between 2 great souls. So the narrator of this section of the Bhagavatam is Narada Muni. And specifically, he is speaking to Maharaj Yudhisthira, who is inquiring from the great sage how to live in a perfect society. So after this point, Maharaj Yudhisthira is the emperor of the world. He is every single continent under his rule. And he wants to know how to be the ideal emperor. In Vedic society, the emperor is supposed to rule the world in such a manner that everyone is at peace and that everyone is also Krishna conscious. And that's the only way to truly have peace, is to have a Krishna consciousness empire. Now, Maharaj Yudhisthira does the correct thing. He approaches a pure devotee of the Lord, and he asks for guidance. And Narada Muni goes on to explain Varnashram Dharma to King Yudhisthira. Now, before we go ahead and break down what Varnashram Dharma is, we actually have to look at technically it's 4 really long verses that all combine to lay the foundation, to understand what one must be in order to understand Varnashram Dharma. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 11, Text 8 through 12. Well, yeah, 5, sorry. So you can tell I'm not a math major, I'm a science major. In either case, because it's such a large grouping of words, or verses, I'll go ahead and recite the Sanskrit, and then we'll read the translation, because you'll see why I'm reading it once you see the actual full translation on the screen. Srila Prabhupada did not hold back. Satyam daya kapasocham titikshe samodamaha ahimsa brahmacharyam cha tyabya swadaya arjavam Santosha Samarpikseva Gramye Paramasanai Nirnam Vipraye Iksha Maunam Atma Dinmarsanam Anyadhyadhe Samvidvago Buddhevyascha Yathadhatha Chetatma Devatha Buddhi Sutaram Nirsupandava Sravanam Kirtanam Chasya Smaranam Matanam Gate Svejvavan Natirdasyam Sakyam Atma Samarpanam Nirnamayam Parodharmaha Sarvesam Samudarpaha Trimsal Lakshanavam Brajan Sarvatmayena Tusyati. Translation. These are the general principles to be followed by all human beings: truthfulness, mercy, austerity, observing fasts on certain days of the month, bathing twice a day, tolerance, discrimination between right and wrong, control of the mind, control of the senses, non-violence, celibacy, charity, reading of scripture, simplicity, satisfaction, rendering service to saintly persons, gradually taking leave of unnecessary engagements, observing the futility of the unnecessary activities of human society, remaining silent and grave, and avoiding unnecessary talk, considering whether one is the body or the soul, distributing food equally to all living entities, both men and animals, seeing every soul, especially in the human form, as a part of the Supreme Lord, hearing about the activities and instructions given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the shelter of the saintly persons, chanting about these activities and instructions, always remembering these activities and instructions, trying to render service, perform worship, offering obeisances, becoming a servant, becoming a friend, and surrendering one's whole self. O King Yudhisthira, these 30 qualifications must be acquired in the human form of life. Simply by acquiring these qualifications, one can satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There we go. That is the baseline for Varnashram Dharma. Those 30 qualities that are listed out by Narada Muni. And most of them seem pretty achievable, yes? No? Maybe? Maybe? That's the honest answer. So, in terms of when we want to think of an ideal society, you must have these 30 qualifications. And it's a process. There's that classic saying, Rome was not built in a day. So, similarly, if you feel that maybe if you're looking at that big list of many different qualities and you're struggling with some, that is okay. I know I'm definitely struggling with some on there myself. So, accepting where you are, but knowing that you have an achievable goal to reach, make a little checklist of each of these qualities and go check, where do I need to work on? But this is our baseline. Before you can even consider Varnashram Dharma, you need to know these 5 verses from the 7th Canto. And then, after establishing this to Maharaj Yudhisthira, now Narada Muni is ready to explain the entire system to the king. So, first, he starts off with the 4 divisions of society. The 4 divisions of society are as follows. You have the Brahmins, the Brahmana class. You have the Kshatriyas. You have the Vaishyas. And you have the Shudras. Every single human being on earth falls into one of these 4 categories, or potentially some others. But ideally, in the ideal system, you are falling into one of these categories. Now, in the modern day, whenever people hear about Varnashram Dharma, especially after post-colonialism of the British conquering India, there was that idea coming out from what the Varnashram Dharma was, and it was modeled into what's just called the caste system. You are where you're born, and that determines your livelihood. And it's seen as very archaic and mundane. But in reality, it's so far from the truth. And we'll circle back on that idea at the very end. In fact, Narada Muni even establishes in one verse how that idea of you are based on what you are born into is completely nonsense. So, let's go ahead and talk about each of these 4 classes. First off, you have the Brahmanas. And the Brahmanas are, in the pyramid, you saw they were at the top of the societal pyramid, but not necessarily, don't think of it as these are the best people. More so that these are the people that have the trickle-down effect on the other classes. They're all connected. Just think of how the body is all connected. Yes, obviously the feet are lower than like the torso, the arms, but they still have a purpose. They still serve the body, and you will get nowhere without your legs and your feet. So, the Brahmanas have 6 occupational duties, and 3 of them are compulsory. The first one is the worship of the deity. The second one is the study of the Vedic texts. And then third is giving of charity. The fourth is teaching others, accepting that role as a teacher, as a guru. The fifth is to induce others to worship the deity. Basically, you want, it's not being selfish and saying the Brahmins only worship the deity. You want to make sure that everyone is accepting the worship of the deity. And finally, also receiving gifts, receiving charity. Now, in the purport of Canto 7, Chapter 11, Text 14, Srila Prabhupada says, a Brahmana cannot take up any professional occupational duty for his livelihood. The Shastras especially stress that if one claims to be a Brahmana, he cannot engage in the service of anyone else. Otherwise, at once he falls from his position and becomes a Shudra. So, that's also where you're starting to get this idea of that mundane concept of the caste system, where people who are just happen to be born in a Brahmin family, they assume I'm a Brahmana. Maybe some Lakshmi, I'll come to your house, I'll do some puja for you, and I'll take my paycheck and I'll go on to the next house. This whole idea of taking on that professional occupation to make money for personal gain. A Brahmana is selfless, not selfish. And he has to only be engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord and serving the benefit of society to make sure that the society is serving the Supreme Lord, not serving the self. Now, you can move from the next class, one below the pyramid. Who remembers what it was? Kshatriyas. Now, the Kshatriyas are the warrior class, the administrative class, or the ruling class. Now, we actually talked about this last Sunday. Does anyone remember what is the duty of a Kshatriya? Protection. Very good. The duty of a Kshatriya is not to fight. Fighting is necessary if the Kshatriya is protecting. Now, Srila Prabhupada elaborates very nicely on what a Kshatriya should do. A king or government may levy taxes upon the citizens in various ways, by revenue duties, custom duties, realization of fines, and so on, provided that the king is able to give full protection to his subjects to assure the security of their life and property. Unless he is able to give protection, he cannot levy taxes. However, a king must not levy taxes upon the Brahmanas and the Vaishnavas fully engaged in Krishna consciousness. So there's our little, how ISKCON Orlando's tax exempt. But that's like the key factor right there. So, Hare Krishna. Just rulership uses the funds to ensure the protection of its citizens. Obviously, now we're in Kali Yuga. It's an age of quarrel and hypocrisy. Money corrupts, governments corrupt. You can see it all throughout modern history. I myself am South American. Every other government's corrupt. It's sort of the state of Latin America. And that's a prime example of how if the government is not just and fully realizing Krishna conscious, there will always be turmoil. And even now, I won't get too political, because we're talking about a divine subject, but if we even just look at the modern American political scene, it's the perfect example of duality, left versus right, and they're always clashing heads. There's no common ground, and that's probably how it's always going to be, because there's no guidance above. This is what happens in the modern day. It's what happens when Kshatriyas do not have Brahmanas to seek guidance from. They get their own delusions of grandeur in their own heads, and everyone thinks I have the right solution, they are wrong, and the other side is doing the exact same thing. Whereas in the ideal society, Kshatriyas look to the Brahmanas, and the Brahmanas refer to Shastra, and that way they will be able to instruct the administrative class on how to treat the kingdom. And the Kshatriyas, as Srila Prabhupada explained, will give protection in order to make sure that all of the people within the kingdom are able to live their lives, protect their property, and the Brahmanas will ensure that all of them are also directing all of their attention towards the Supreme Lord and an ideal society, and not Texas, Islam of Orlando. And then, what's one class below? The Vaishyas. This is the mercantile class, the business class. This is the beating heart of society, how everything kind of ticks. Now, Srila Prabhupada has multiple different comments on how the Vaishya society should operate and what is the ideal forms of trade and business that they should be engaged in. The mercantile community should always follow the directions of the Brahmanas and engage in such occupational duties as agriculture, trade, and the protection of cows. Those are the three big ones that Srila Prabhupada lists. But anyone want to share why do you think he lists agriculture? I'll give you an easy one. Why would Srila Prabhupada stress agriculture?
Protecting cows.
Exactly. It's circular. You protect agriculture in order to have a sustainable, very lush agricultural scene. You need to protect cows. And by protecting the cows, not only are you provided with a plentiful amount of different dairy products to offer to the Lord and sustain the self, but the cow in return holds up agriculture. Nothing's more potent in this world than cow manure. It tills the fields. It is literally fuel. You can use it to build walls. It is nature's Swiss Army knife. You can use cow dung for so many purificatory things. And then, of course, trade. So obviously, not everywhere in the world is the exact same climate. I can grow mangoes here in Florida. If I go up to, let's say, upstate New York, I'm going to struggle to even get a mango pit to seed. But they have other resources further up north that won't grow as nicely as they do down here. So trade is always good to make sure that you have bountiful goods. But trade is primarily agricultural. If you think about what your body needs, food, water, shelter, the temple. You don't need to go over the top and be overly excessive. So the Vaishyas should be focused on the main needs of society, and that is agricultural trade and perhaps raw material trade, stuff that is needed to build shelter. Anything over the top, it's not really fully necessary to society. Srila Prabhupada continues with explaining the qualities of the Vaishya. Being always devoted to the demigods, the spiritual master, and the supreme Lord, Vishnu, endeavoring for advancement in religious principles, economic development, and sense gratification, dharma, artha, and kama, believing in the words of the spiritual master and scripture, and always endeavoring with the expertise in earning money. These are the symptoms of a Vaishya. So if you see anyone who has these traits within them, congratulations, you've identified a Vaishya. Now, one step below, what's our final class? Shudras. This is what Srila Prabhupada has to say about Shudras. Offering obeisances to the higher sections of society, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas. Being always very clean. Being free from duplicity. Serving one's master. Performing sacrifices without uttering mantras. Not stealing. Always speaking the truth. And giving all protection to the cows and Brahmanas. These are the symptoms of a Shudra. Now, remember earlier we talked about how there's the mundane concept of the caste system. I am a Brahmana, I am a Kshatriya, I am a Vaishya. All of them are Shudras. Srila Prabhupada multiple times has commented that everyone in Kali Yuga is a Shudra. Because the mindset, remember each of the times that you looked at these purports, Srila Prabhupada uses the word symptom. He does not say birth. In Kali Yuga, Everyone shows the symptoms of a Shudra, but not a good Shudra. It's a bad one. This is a good Shudra. In Kali Yuga, we are corrupted because you have all these material desires that are just tangled in there, and they fog the mind and cause you to think selfishly. Push up your false ego to the nth degree, to the point where a Shudra will think himself a Brahmana. Now, in this purport, there's one thing that Srila Prabhupada mentions, giving all protection to the cows and the Brahmanas. Once again, if you look at how that pyramid was, Shudras were at the base. If you think about when you build a house, you always start with a strong foundation. If you do not have a strong foundation, it does not matter how nice everything else is. You can put gilded furniture inside, you can have a beautiful ceramic roof, but if you don't have that support structure underneath, everything comes crashing down and you have no society, you have anarchy. So that's why it's so important that the Shudras hold up society. They give the other classes what they need, specifically the Brahmanas. Because if the bottom supports the top can then trickle down, and then the Kshatriyas can administrate, the Vaishyas can maintain everybody through their economic development, and it all supports each other. Each caste works with one another. They are not separate entities living on their own thing. The Brahmanas are not off in the Himalayas doing their own thing. The Shudras are not out in the fields. The Vaishyas aren't staying inside the marketplace. They interact with one another. They have to. That's how societies work. Try to have a conversation with someone without making eye contact, body contact, speaking, sending letters, no communication. It's not possible. So they have to interact, and those interactions have to be favorable. Now, Srila Prabhupada continues in this purport. Unless one is completely pure and has been raised to the standard of a Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya, in other words, unless one is Dvija, twice born, the chanting of mantras will not be fruitful. Mic drop. This is where, once again, you stress on not understanding your position based on Kali Yuga. So, I have a picture of a kid dressed up as a doctor. In a lot of cases in the modern society, this is where you see people who are only assuming that they're this class. And they're basically a child playing dress up. There's no actual substance behind it. So if you think about, let's say, someone who is born in a Brahmana family, and that's it. They don't undergo Vedic studies. They don't undergo initiation and second initiation from a spiritual master. But they still play the role of as a Brahmana, going door to door saying, I will do puja for you. $500. Thank you. And it's as useful as you going to the hospital and a child who's dressed up like that, giving you the medicine that you need. It's not going to do you any good, and you're now out of pocket $500. This also goes the same way you want to apply, previously we mentioned, performing sacrifices without uttering mantras. That is what a Shudra should be doing. If you think now, especially now in the modern day, you go to different areas, like big like yoga retreats that will take you to the Himalayas, pay us $2,000, we'll fly you in first class and take you up to Rishikesh. And they take this mantra. Is that coming from an authentic source, or is that more financially motivated? So that's the other thing where you have low quality Shudras versus a Varnashram Shudra. A Varnashram Dharma Shudra should be only providing services needed for other castes, not assuming I'm going to do this and this, but I'm just a simple liver, I'm not undergone the formal process to become a Brahmana. So knowing one's position and accepting it is key here. And note that anyone can be any of these qualities based on their symptoms. And speaking of which, this is what Narada Muni solidifies this concept in. We would like to read this verse. Anyway, mic's right in front of you.
Yes. Yasya lakshanam proktam pumso varna vivanjakam yadanya chavidrishyeta tattenaiva vinirdishet. If one shows the symptoms of being a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, as described above, even if he has appeared in a different class, he should be accepted according to these symptoms of classification.
There you have it. The entire caste system has been torn to shreds by one simple verse from Narada. If one shows the symptoms. So in the early days of ISKCON, when Srila Prabhupada was bringing his first Western disciples to India, there were some who thought, like, they're not qualified, they're yavanas, they're malechas. How can you be giving them Gayatri? How can you be letting them do worship of the deity? They are below Shudra, they are Chandala, dog eaters. They shouldn't be doing this. But Srila Prabhupada stressed, they are showing, they're being taught properly in the Vedic system, they're understood Shastra, they're living cleanly, they are showing the symptoms of a Brahmana, of a Vaishnava, irregardless of their birth. So it doesn't matter where you are, it matters what you have, your qualities within, and how you cultivate them. If you have the propensities for business, but you were born in a lower class family, if you are able to develop that, study it properly, and achieve that economic advancement, congratulations. You are a Vaishya, even though you may have been born in a low, quote unquote, lower family. If you have a very deep interest in studying Vedic scripture, you memorize verses left and right, you understand the meaning behind it, and you've sought and understood and accepted initiation from a spiritual master, irregardless of your birth, you are a Brahmana. Or if you have a propensity to fight and administer and protect those who need protection under the guidance of someone who is enlightened, then you're a Kshatriya. If you show the symptoms. Now, those are the 4 classes. There are now also the 4 ashrams of society. And rather than what's one's occupation, this is more on the single individual self. Now, the 4 spiritual orders each progress into one another. They're stepping stones. We first have brahmacharya, student life, followed by grihastha, which is your family life. Then vanaprast, retired life. And finally, sannyas, the renounced order of life. And we'll go ahead and break down each of these spiritual ashrams one by one. So first off, you have brahmacharya. This is the student life. This is when you study under the guidance of a guru, understanding Shastra, understanding scripture and one's duty. Now, would I like to have another volunteer who would want to read this verse? Vishnu.
Shri Narada Brahmachari Gurukule Vasantanto Rohitam Acharan Dasavannicho Gurau Sudrat Saurda. Narad Muni said, a student should practice completely controlling his senses. He should be submissive and should have an attitude of fun friendship for the spiritual master. With a great vow, the brahmachari should live at the Gurukul only for the benefit of the Guru.
So student life is controlling the senses. So in terms of, I guess, a little bit of my personal life, I am an education specialist. And I can tell you, in the modern day, most students cannot control themselves in the slightest. Especially you ask teachers in Florida, I am surprised that they are still with hair on their heads. They are uncontrolled animals. And that happens when students don't have proper guidance from home and from the teacher sometimes. Proper guidance, which engages the student in good study, but at the same time should have a good relationship. Your student should not hate their teacher. You go ahead and now you ask, let's say, I just finished a summer camp recently with a group of kids. Everyone, we asked what was your favorite subject in school, and then what their least favorite was. Everyone said they hated math. And said, did you hate your teacher? Yes. Why? Because they taught math. They had to stress that over and over again. One can't really properly learn and control oneself if you have dislike for your teacher. You have to have that appreciation for the guru. If you have that appreciation, you're more naturally going to absorb anything that's given to them. It's not seen as a lecture. It's seen as a gift. And people hold gifts close to them, and they carry them on for a lifetime. Does everyone remember every single thing they were taught in middle school from their government teacher or their history teacher? I stand my case. But do you remember something that a dear friend told you or a family member shared with you instantly? Generally, yes, something that's shared with deep conviction, you are going to carry on with you. And that should be the relationship with the student. You should have a great friendship and service attitude towards the guru. And that way, anything that's imparted from them to the student, it sticks. It's not just hollow noise going in one ear and out the other. It goes in one ear, the brain processes it, and then it goes down to the heart where the soul lives, and it stays with you. Once you've completed student life, you then move on to grihastha life, which is family life. Now, this is sort of where some people, when they look at the ashram, say, okay, I've done my celibacy as a student, I've controlled my senses, now it's time to get hitched, and I can finally go out and enjoy the world with my family. And then there's that mentality, grihastha ashram is not really an ashram. It is still an ashram. And this is this idea of where it's like, I'm in my family now, it's now time to go out and enjoy Mickey Mouse and everything he has to show at Disney World. On a daily basis, get my annual pass, try to go every weekend. This is where people confuse grihamedi versus grihastha. Grihamedis live to serve their families and themselves, and that's it. Personal gratification within the family unit. Grihasthas live only to serve the spiritual master and Krishna. And by doing so, by pleasing the spiritual master and Krishna, they come together and they are happy. Just think about it. If you talk with your partner, you probably have things that you like that they don't, and vice versa. So let's say, I want to have pasta tonight. No, I want to have sambar. And then you just go back and forth, and then you just end up just having something plain because you couldn't come up. Versus if you just say, no, we are making this dinner, prasad, for the Guru and Krishna. We'll partake in whatever is left over for us. Having that service mentality when in the family unit means that instead of unnecessary distraction within, you're focused on the true purpose of family life. And then also the act of beginning and raising Krishna consciousness is a great service. Trust me, I know our parents in here, you've pulled a few hairs from your heads. We thank you for your service. It is not for the weak-minded. Raising a child in Krishna consciousness is one of the most potent things you can do as service to the Guru. Because society's backbone is family. Found family and then blood family. We can go out every single day distributing books and sharing the Mahamantra. But at the same time, we also have to cultivate a family life as well if we are in the Grihastha ashram, and making sure that the family units are strong. Because if the family units are strong, that's where all the support for book distribution comes from. Trust me, we just read that Brahmanas don't accept occupational duty. How are they making money to buy and print books? Each class supports one another. And that's why Grihasthas are able to support the Brahmacharis, and so on and so forth. So even the ashrams work with one another. So just because you're a Grihastha, don't belittle yourself thinking that I'm lower than the other ashrams. No. You are still in a renounced order. You are still observing austerities. The austerity of ensuring that this soul that you brought into the world as a child is being raised to serve Krishna. There's the concept that this is my child, this is my family. And that's the wrong mentality. That's a grihamedi mentality. A grihastha mentality is, I am the caretaker of Krishna's children. I am the caretaker of Krishna's husband or Krishna's wife. That is a mindset that a grihastha should have. How can I cultivate a home environment so that everyone who lives under this roof can attain self-realization? That is what the mentality and mindset of a grihastha should be. Now, once you move on from grihastha life, you enter vanaprastha, and this is the retired stage of life. It's not seen as much nowadays, but this is this point where once you're finishing up your grihastha life, you are now taking a step back from the material world. So where the Grihastha ashram is a license to operate in the material world but not be of it, you're only using it to maintain yourself, your family, in service of Krishna. Now as a Vanaprastha, you're moving away from material life. You're retiring from it all. Ideally, according to the 7th canto, you are doing so in the forest. And this is what Srila Prabhupada has translated from 7:12:22. Being very thoughtful, a Vanaprastha should remain in the forest for 12 years, 8 years, 4 years, 2 years, or at least 1 year. He should behave in such a way that he will not be disturbed or troubled by too much austerity. Now, how many of you can give up everything and live in austerity like that? Can you be honest? We're very honest, I see. So, it's not easy. Because if you think about how the material world is structured, the strongest ties in this world is family. Breaking familial ties is difficult. I think you've raised your child to the point from changing their diapers to now you're seeing them walk on the stage for graduation. Severing that tie and then focusing on the self for self-realization and the purificatory process is not easy. But when one does so under proper guidance and understands that I have raised my family, I know they are now fully Krishna conscious and they are able to continue to maintain society, I don't have to worry about them. This is the whole, think about like when you have birds of prey, like an osprey or an eagle. After they've reared their chick to the point where it gets its first flight done, the parents will let the juvenile stay for a little bit more, but then once it can fully fly and take care of itself, parents move on. They don't need to focus on the child anymore. That child is fully self-sustained. Anything else left behind is just pure sentiment. So understanding that I have raised everything, my material affairs are set in order, I can now just focus on the self. I don't need to overexert. I don't need to go and eat out every night anymore. I don't need to eat lavishly. I can just eat simply, just give my body what it needs based on what nature provides. In fact, in this chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam of the 7th canto, Narada Muni even goes to explain that a Vanaprastha technically should be only feasting on wild grains, not even tilled grains. They're completely cut off from the agricultural part of society. They're getting just what they can obtain in nature itself. So hence why also it's listed here, 12, 8, 4, 2, or at least 1 year, depending on what the status of your body is. Because naturally the body deteriorates. It may be hard to do severe austerity and renouncing the world if you're at a more elderly stage, but at least if you can attempt to do some in your Vanaprastha life and focus on the soul within and understanding the constitutional position. Or you can just force them to live on mangoes, which honestly is not a bad thing. I'm sure a mango diet has a lot of benefits for you. And then lastly, of the 4 ashrams, you have sannyas. This is the renounced order of life. And the previous 4 ashrams, Narada Muni explained in 1 chapter. There's an entire chapter in the 7th canto dedicated simply to describing the qualities and the activities of a sannyasi. And Srila Prabhupada beautifully translated to the perfect person. This is a person who has completely removed themselves from everything in this material world. They are completely on this spiritual platform. And if I could have somebody read this following verse, Mataji, if anyone, or was anyone who would like to tackle it?
Eka eva charet bhikshu atmaramo napashrayaha sarvabhuta suruchanto narayana parayanaha. The sannyasi, completely satisfied in the self, should live on alms begged from door to door. Not being dependent on any person or any place, he should always be a friendly well-wisher to all living beings, and be a peaceful, unalloyed devotee of Narayana. In this way, he should move from one place to another.
So he's constantly moving around. He is unalloyed. And he is the well-wisher of all living beings and be a peaceful devotee. He is not going to convention center selling this book for a couple easy payments of $19.95. He's not going around saying $5, Jai, giving you blessings and moving on to the next person. He is moving around the planet, selflessly serving everybody and spreading love for Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada is the perfect example of a perfect sannyasi. He could have stayed in Vrindavan at Shri Shri Radha Damodar Mandir. Could have spent the rest of his time there, happily chanting the mantra of the Dham. But he was a devout devotee of his spiritual master, and he prepared diligently for decades everything so that he could travel across the world and spread Krishna's name all around the planet, fulfilling Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission to every town and village. Does anyone know how many times Srila Prabhupada circled the globe? 14. 14 times. Every single continent minus Antarctica. But there has been Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam sets now distributed in Antarctica. So because of ISKCON, Mahaprabhu's legacy has carried on to every single continent on earth. That is the perfect person. No impediment. Multiple heart attacks on a cargo ship. No impediment. No money. No impediment. Krishna provided every step of Srila Prabhupada's journey because he was an unalloyed devotee. And that is a sannyasi. Now, the final sections of the Bhagavatam break down even more a couple other details for the following ashrams, specifically for the brahmachari and for the grihastha. Mostly the grihastha, because that is the largest ashram in society, and it always will be. Once students graduate, there will be family life. There are a lot of families in the world. There are a lot of families in this room. So, if you want to speak to what an ideal family is, you should turn to the Srimad Bhagavatam, specifically chapter 14. Now, I will go ahead and preface. The second half of the Srimad Bhagavatam is extensive, and this is only a simple summary. There are very in-depth details on what families should do, what students should do. So by all means, on your own time, go and study the second half of the Bhagavatam in depth, verse by verse, purport by purport. There's only so much I can do in a given space of time. But to summarize, living simply is purity. And this is emphasized multiple points in chapter 14. While working to earn his livelihood as much as necessary to maintain the body and soul together, one who is actually learned should live in human society unattached to family affairs, although externally appearing very much attached. That is an art form. How many of you have a big family? A few? How many of you like every single member of your family like a very close friend? There you go. But at family reunions, you play face. You'll say, hi, how are you? How have you been? How are the kids? How's the job? So on and so forth. You go through the pleasantries. You move through the motions because it's polite to do so. But you're not overly attached because ultimately, how is it going to benefit you? It's not. It may make you feel nice or puffed up. It's like, yeah, my nephew just got accepted into Harvard. Well, mine just got accepted into Yale. It's a nice sentiment, but ultimately it doesn't benefit the self, primarily in terms of spiritual practice. But you do so because you are to be a gentleman or a lady. Srila Prabhupada always emphasized that anyone who's a part of his ISKCON devotees, they are always top-class gentlemen and ladies. Manners matter. So, that's always something to keep in mind. Just because you're renouncing everything doesn't mean you renounce manners. You always have to give a proper outward performance. But ultimately understand that this is just the material world, I am just doing what I need to do to get by so that I can focus on my priorities. And what's more important than serving the Lord? Srila Prabhupada gave to the Western world deity worship, how to serve. Because ultimately, if a community has a singular purpose to serve Shri Sri Nitai Gauda Nataraj, then if everyone's on the same page, everyone is being able to experience that same level of happiness. And there's not as much quarreling and bickering, except for the fact that who gets the Maha Sweets at the end of the program. So having that common goal and a common focal point is so essential for family life and keeping things simple. If you go over the top, you get, let's say you have 6 or 7 figures that you're earning. In the long run, if you're just giving that back to yourself, that drives that positive feedback loop. I need more, I need more, I need more, versus I should be giving this in service of the Lord, because ultimately everything that I'm accruing in my material line of work, it's not mine. I'm just a caretaker for Krishna. And then in the final section of this chapter, or this canto, the Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes instructions for the civilized human beings. So these are people who are already fixed in Varnashram Dharma, whether they be a Brahmana, a Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra, and no matter what stage of life and what ashram they may be in, they must all follow these instructions in order to be considered civilized. And lo and behold, it's not everything that you see in modern Western society. Now, text 25 of chapter 15. One must conquer the modes of passion and ignorance by developing in the mode of goodness. And then one must become detached from the mode of goodness by promoting oneself to the platform of Shuddha Sattva. All of this can be automatically done if one engages in the service of the spiritual master with faith and devotion. In this way, one can conquer the influence of the modes of material nature. So regardless of what caste you are in, Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, Brahmana, you should be trying to rid yourself of the modes of material nature. We already see in the modern day what happens when each of these classes are influenced by passion and ignorance. Even in goodness, it gets you nowhere. By alleviating yourself of the modes, that is how you achieve this perfect society. According to the Vedas, there are 2 kinds of activities, pravriti and nivritti. Pravriti activities involve raising oneself from a lower to a higher condition of material life, whereas nivritti means cessation of material desire. Through pravriti activities, one suffers from material entanglement. But by nivritti activities, one is purified and becomes fit to enjoy eternal, blissful life. So think about that. How many of you want to be a millionaire? Be honest. Raise your hands. How many of you would like to be let's say I can make you a millionaire right now. How many of you would like it? Are you ready for the taxes? Ah, look at that.
Okay,
Are
if
you
you are
ready
a
for
smart
all the
business person, you
paperwork?
don't have to pay.
Are you ready for all your family members who want to claim their inheritance? Are you ready for the property taxes? So on and so forth. The more you accumulate in material society, the more heavier your workload will get. You'd think that, yeah, I am now earning millions. This is great. But now, millions of dollars means millions of problems. Vice versa, at the same time, you don't want to be completely impoverished. You want to just earn what you need to sustain your body. If you have a healthy body and mind, then you can take care and have a healthy spirit. And just think about like a vine. So we have a picture of the vine. Whenever you give a plant fertilizer, what happens? It grows. So if you're giving fertilizer to a vine, you get more and more tangles, more and more webs. That's basically what pravriti is. If you feed more energy to your material life, no matter what ashram you may be in, it just gets worse and worse and worse to the point where now you have a gigantic vine that strangles. There. Shri Shri Nitai Gauda Nataraj. There is a type of fig that grows here in Florida called a strangler fig. And It grows exactly like you think and how the name sounds. It literally wraps around its host tree. If it gets enough food and water, it will kill the host tree and strangle it until all that's left is a strangler fig that's growing nice and tall and a dead husk of the tree in the center. That is poverty. You're not feeding the correct tree, and you end up wilting away and getting entangled in material life. And then nivritti, that is the opposite. Ceasing that material desire. You're not giving attention to that strangler fig that's growing up. It may still go around you. You still have to live in the material world, whether you like it or not. But you're not going to be consumed by it. You'll say, okay, I have my material engagements. How can I serve those in Krishna though? And there are trees that, if they have enough nutrients and sunlight, they're completely unfazed by the strangler fig, even though it's growing along the side of it. So that's why it's so important to focus on your end goal. What is our end goal? That is our end goal. How can we serve them life after life after life and eternally in the spiritual world? Now, last part of this presentation, I would like to do a little bit of a discussion. And I throw it to all of you. How do you think we can implement concepts of Varnashram Dharma now in the modern day? So, anyone has any ideas or questions, feel free to share your thoughts. We have one mic here. Bajra Govind, if you grab one extra mic from the closet, please. So, does anyone have any ideas? How can we implement the concepts of Varnashram Dharma in the modern day? In our beautiful, tangled political system of the modern United States? Any ideas?
Well, for one, teach Krishna consciousness,
Yes.
especially to the modern politicians and the modern leaders of the world.
That probably, ironically, will fix most of our problems. Giving Kshatriyas a Brahmana to listen to.
Yeah, exactly that, and also, what is it? Tracing my mind. Oh, if we get all the old heads to go sannyas, for them to renounce it. All the old politicians, get them to renounce it and chase Krishna.
Well, I think let's first put them on Vanaprastha first. I don't know
Yes,
if all of them
yes,
should be a sannyasi.
yes.
But that's the key part. A lot of times, if you look in modern society, as people get older, they are still keeping on to material life to the very point, up to death. On your deathbed, you're just thinking, my inheritance, my house, my pets, my boat. Oh, my boat. We're in Florida. We're in the boating capital of the world. What am I going to do with my yacht? That clinging to everything that you've accumulated. Ultimately, once we reach the latter stages of our lives, we should be renouncing, retiring. Proper retirement, not setting up a retirement home here in Orlando on the coastline, or coming into the city. No. Actual retirement means separating yourself from everything that you've done so far in your material life, knowing that you have set it aside properly, and then focusing exclusively and solely on the service of the spiritual master and Krishna. You have a lot of politicians that are in their elderly years will have much better leadership if they did that. But welcome to Kali Yuga. But a little bit of change over time makes huge ripples. So by all means, when we go out and share Krishna consciousness and people ask you about the caste system, it's archaic, it doesn't work. It does, if it's implemented properly under the guidance of Shastra and a spiritual master. Any other ideas? We have the
Just one thing you just said, separate ourselves with retirement from what we did all our life. But the thing is, it's typical that everybody works for retirement. So they try to work hard because they're young. I'm young, I'm going to work hard now because when I'm retired, I'll have all this money, I'll have all this, I don't have to work. So this has to come from beginning of life. You have to have that mindset that what is retirement in this case? Otherwise, we're going to be working all the time, and then when you retire, you want to enjoy your retirement. My trip savings is $1 million now, so I'll be set. I won't have to work. I will enjoy the retirement. So this is a mindset that typical everybody has in their mind. So we have to train the mind from young what is retirement?
Exactly. If you think about it now when you're growing up, you're young, you're ignorant of the world. And then once you graduate, you got your degrees, you got your job, you start working hard. You're putting in those long shifts to set aside a little bit for retirement. You're fully engrossed in the mode of passion. And then you move on, finally you get to retire, everything's nice, I'm living in a nice mode of goodness, but then you become stagnant. You're just enjoying everything you've accumulated. Sure, it might be nice, it might be set aside, you have a nice organic smoothie every morning, you're just taking care of your joints, you're not worried about all the turmoil in the world because I'm retired. But you're just getting caught up in the mode of goodness. And ultimately, you even want to sever your ties from that as well. So, start young. How old was Prahlad Maharaj when he 6? How old was Dhruva Maharaj? 4. Once you can attain basic cognitive thought, you should already start to accumulate spiritual knowledge and practice. Because then, that will have a much more beneficial impact when you're approaching the retired years of life. How else?
So one way for Ganesha is you live off-grid in a farm community, completely separate from society. And Srila Prabhupada said, when you have these farm communities properly established, millions of people.
Yes, but not separate from society. Working together off-grid, interchanging
Material society.
Yes, there you go. That's the key thing. When people think off the grid, they think severing ties from everything. But we are Vaishnavas. Vaishnavas need sadhu sangha. Associating with other Vaishnavas from other communities as well, going to see other deities. But having a home base, having a strong community, specifically the farm community. What's one of the main things that Vaishyas are meant to protect? Cows. And by doing so, the cow provides everything for you. The cow is mother. So you take care of your mother, she will give everything you need to grow big and strong. Srila Prabhupada said, a cup of milk in the evening does wonders for the body. The fine capillaries in the brain, everything can be sustained from that one cup of pure milk. Not skim milk, not 2%, whole milk. 2% skim milk, it's low fat, that's nonsense. The fat in the milk is where you get the energy. Think about it, even when you give milk to a child, you're not giving them diluted milk, you're giving that pure, raw. When you get pure milk from a cow who is protected and cared for, not only are all the nutrients in that milk, but the love is in there too. That is how you're able to keep your body happy. And then, if you're doing that together as a community, taking care of the cows, growing your own produce, you don't have to worry if there's an economic crash because you're getting all of your corn from Iowa or you're getting all of your citrus from Florida. No, you're growing everything you need to sustain yourselves. And if there's another community that grows everything that they need, you can trade. That's where the Vaishyas come in. So you can vary things up so you're not having the same kitchery every single day. But if need be, every community should be self-sustaining. Because that way, you don't have to worry about, oh no, the stock market crashed. It's okay. The vegetable garden works. The cows are still doing what they do. The deity is still well taken care of. We're fine. It's not the end of the world. Those are just numbers moving up and down on the screen with a green arrow and a red arrow. That is not going to influence your spiritual life. You are the master of your own destiny, and by doing so, you should make sure that you're engaging it properly. Serving and following the orders of the spiritual master, serving a community of like-minded individuals. How else can we apply Varnashram Dharma? Especially, let's say, think about here in Orlando. Obviously, zoning doesn't allow us to do a completely isolated farming community right here in Orlando, but we can apply concepts of Varnashram Dharma right here. How do we think we can do that? Any ideas? Yes?
A garden?
A garden! We have a beautiful garden right outside. So simple things, little things that we can do, that what we can produce with our own hands to take care of the Lord. Most of, if not all of us are in here, are grihastas. Our duty is to take care of our family so that they have an environment suitable to be Krishna conscious. And then also, when we are earning our livelihoods, we are making sure that we know what we are earning and who we are earning for. We're not a grihamedi. We're not serving the needs of our family because they want the newest gaming console, or they want to have Peruvian ice delivered every single day for their smoothies. No, you want to make sure, okay, we're giving nice fruits for our home deities. Mangoes, peaches, cherries, almonds, everything nice so that we can serve the deities. If the deities are happy in our home and here at the temple, then we can share in that happiness after they've been served. It's that mindset. Varnashram Dharma is not necessarily something physical that you can see, it is a mindset. Remember, what's the one word that Narada Muni used to describe each of the classes? Symptom. Not physical status, symptom. What are you inwardly displaying? That determines your outward position. And then ultimately, what is every single living being? A spirit soul. That is another big thing, especially now if you think about in modern context. Oh, I'm upper middle class. I've made it here in the United States. I've got 2 cars. I've got my 5-bedroom house with a nice driveway. I'm not going to worry about 3 blocks that way where it's a little less desirable, because those are below me. That's a Grihamedi mentality. A Grihastha mentality, any sannyas, vanapras, brahmachari, everyone sees everyone with equal vision. Because we're all ultimately souls. And that's it. The spirit soul that is within every single body here. There's no difference whether they're Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. They're all a spirit soul. They're all equal in the eyes of the Lord. And we are part and parcel of the Lord. So therefore, we should also see everybody with equal vision. And when you do that, that is when you can actually see proper cooperation between society. If you go into interaction with society with that superiority complex, okay, I am an administrator. I am going to go and placate with the commoners, secure their vote. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. They're earning, maybe 5 figures. I've got already 2 houses, one here in Florida, one in Washington. I'm just going to go, make them happy for a couple days while I visit, go back to my life of luxury. No. Service attitude. How can I serve others? How can I serve my community? What can I do to serve my spiritual master and please Krishna? Any other thoughts or questions? Yes, ma'am.
Very nice class. Thank you for a lot of information. One of the slides you were sharing that to chant the mantras, we have to come to the level of Vaishya, Brahman or Kshatriya. Shudra was not mentioned there. So then, and another point you mentioned, like we all are born Shudra in the age of Kali. So how do we correlate that point?
Well, for one, there's the follow-up question. Are we Vaishnavas? Vaishnava transcends all of that. Vaishnava is above Shudra. It's above Vaishya, Kshatriya, Brahman. If you are a Vaishnava, you're automatically qualified. Now, being a Vaishnava is not something that you were born. It is something that you practice every single day. Understanding sincerity. It's not the same thing as I was born in a Vaishnava family, therefore I'm a Vaishnava. Yeah, I was born to Vaishnava parents. I was given a spiritual name when I was born. That didn't make me a Vaishnava when I was born. Constant study and accepting guidance from a spiritual master and following that guidance is what makes you a Vaishnava. And when you do so, it doesn't matter what your outward occupation may be, you may chant those mantras. But if you don't, and you're just a diligent working member of society, like a Shudra, then you should just do your duty, but know your place at the same time. Drive in your own lane. If, let's say, you're getting your driver's license, first you have to get your learner's permit. You're not driving on your own when you have a learner's permit, otherwise you're going to get punished. Similarly, when you are starting your journey in your spiritual life, if you try to do everything on your own, it's going to get you nowhere. In some cases, if you do things improperly and cause offenses, then you're facing laws that are established by Shastra. which are long going to outlast anything that is placed in the U.S. Constitution. So understanding where you're at, spiritually, materially, and understanding the process of, yes, I'm serving my spiritual master, he has told me to do so, therefore I will do it. So always understand, Vaishnav surpasses all of the social classes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, bro.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, nice class. During the lecture you mentioned Srila Prabhupada in his purport says, in Kali Yuga we're all born Sudras. And when I heard it and I thought that means bad thing. But the way the definition shown is actually like a compliment to us. Because the Shudra definition means elevated than what I am today. So that may be a desired state, like in the other 4 categories you mentioned Grihastha and Grihmedhi, right? Grihmedhi is a perversion of the Grihastha. So is there a Shudra perversion, is there a name for it? Like what is today's existing status of a Shudra?
There are a few, and there are also one thing that like I mentioned at the beginning, the second half of the 7th canto gets extremely in-depth. There are different class qualifications. There are even the mixing of classes, someone who has a Kshatriya parent and a Vaishya parent, or Shudra parent and vice versa. There are different orders in there as well. Off the top of my head, I'm not remembering the one for Shudra, but in terms of what you just mentioned, Shudra is not an insult. Chandala is. But in terms of understanding the wording, let's put it into perspective. Every single service that you do, if done with devotion, is equal in the eyes of the Lord. If you're on the altar performing arati, that seva is the exact same as someone who is out there pulling the weeds, or someone who is taking all the trash or cleaning their toilet in the bathroom. Even though this may be Brahmin work, that may be Shudra work. If they're done in the context of devotional service, they're equal. So Shudra can be an insult if it's not in a Krishna conscious context. But if it is, you're simply performing your duty. And it's a necessary duty, remember. Shudras are the foundation of Varnashram society. What happens when that foundation doesn't exist? Everything crumbles. Try doing arti when no one's growing the flowers. Try doing arti when no one is able to provide the electricity. Or try anything that you can think of. Anything that needs just someone to bring stone to build a temple. Everything works together. Shudra should not be an insult if it has a Krishna conscious context.
One thing in relation to that, like other names or type of things, like in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says in 7:14, among speaking of Maya, like Aswan Bhagavamashita, it's talking about like the 4 kinds of people who have demoniac natures, and that's more relating to like, the type of people.
Yes. And especially now in Kali Yuga. Everyone has demoniac tendencies. It's just a matter of, can you eradicate them out of yourself by engaging in devotional service. So a Shudra who has all those demoniac tendencies which are just festering, like poverty, like that vine that's constantly growing, yeah, they're a Shudra. And they're going to remain a Shudra for the rest of their life. But if you have a Shudra who is engaged in devotional service, they're practicing Nivriti, then they are now elevated to the stage of Vaishnava. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions about anything you covered? Or anything, thoughts on how to implement Varnashram Dharma in the modern day?
I guess implementing Varnashram in the modern day, I'd say especially like in America, you can see that just the influences of society breeds consumerism. So maybe starting off from a young age, teaching your kids to discriminate between wants and needs.
Yes. So if you think about when we most readily absorb information, it's when we're a child. And specifically the developmental years just before puberty. So roughly around like 6 to 7 years old up to like around 12 years old, The mind is literally a sponge. You're going to pick up so much. This is how you can tell if when let's say for example you're raising a child to be bilingual. You're teaching them from that early age up through then, and then probably by the time they're 10 years old, they're most likely going to be fluent. Versus if you try to teach your child their secondary language after puberty, good luck. They might learn, but their accent's going to be terrible. Same thing applies to spiritual life. You start early, because then everything becomes second nature. Everything is naturally absorbed, so you don't have to get into arguments with a teenager saying, this is why it's that way, and then butt heads the entire time. If it's already established early on, at a young age, the child can then grow into adulthood knowing these concepts and carry them out. Because remember, what is the backbone of society? Family. Families are. Because if children are growing into the world with proper guidance and instruction, that breeds more positivity. And therefore, more like-minded people can come together and build a more ideal society. Versus the alternative where everyone's only learning everything in more higher concepts when they're getting into college or maybe the latter years of high school. Yeah, that's great. Your mind is now more developed, so you can start to have more critical thinking. But if you don't have that foundation underneath, then you can just come up with as many other random things into your head as possible. And because you have a degree, everyone kind of accepts it. So that's why it's so important. The Grihastha ashram is so essential in Varnashram Dharma, because it lays down the next generation with a solid base. So yeah, by all means, all the parents who brought their kids today, good job. All of those who didn't, do we have anything else that we could think of, or any questions about anything that I covered?
I guess a question.
Sure.
So whenever you're talking about like the Vanaprastha ashram, I guess the way that it was described, it could be perceived as like, oh, whenever you enter like the Vanaprastha stage, you have to go to the woods and you have to do this. But at least like what we're taught now is like we don't do that, and you see like with a lot of Western like Grihastha styles, like even like Srila Prabhupada encourages like if you're getting married, you don't get a divorce. And so what, I guess, could you give us examples of what a Vanaprastha lifestyle is like in the modern age?
Yeah. So, if you also think about the different types of schools, you have the Vaishnavas and you also have the Mayavads. A lot of Mayavads don't go to the mountains. They're more that isolation. Vaishnavas go to places of pilgrimage. Vrindavan, Mayapur, Puri. So, in the modern day, if you've already set aside all of your material activities, I've raised my family, they're Krishna conscious, they're self-sustaining and productive members of society, I don't have to worry about them. Now I can focus inwardly on my spiritual self, go into Vrindavan, I'm going to Mayapur, or I'm coming to ISKCON of Orlando as frequently and often as I can. How can I fully engage myself constantly in devotional service without having to worry about any material sustainment, because ultimately at this point I don't need to worry about that. Krishna will provide everything that I need. So it may be as simple as that, moving in close enough proximity to a temple or a holy place where you can constantly worship the Lord, and that can take many different forms. It may just be simply going and you're, for the rest of your life, you're in the 24 Kirtan Mandali in Vrindavan, just constantly, every single day, chanting for Radha Shyam Sundar. It could be that you are going to move to Mayapur and you're just going to study Shastra there on the banks of the Ganges. Could be as simple as you find a home that's within a 5 to 10 minute walking distance of ISKCON Orlando, so that you can walk daily to see their lordship, Sri Sri Tagore Nataraj, and help in whatever way you can in their service. But its simplicity is the main part. That is the key factor for the renounced order of life. If I've spent my entire career working as a surgeon, I am loaded for my retirement. You don't need it anymore if you're entering the Vanaprastha ashram. You set aside only what you need, simple home, close to a site of pilgrimage. Everything else you give to your family. They will maintain your material affairs. You focus everything you have for Krishna. And that's really what it is. Simple life and simplicity is renunciation. But yeah. So no, you don't have to go into the middle of the forest, especially here in Florida. That's a little bit trickier than the peaceful Himalayan forests. A lot more teeth and mosquitoes. So I don't know how long you'd actually survive as a bunaprast in Florida if you did it traditionally. Any other last minute
Srila Prabhupada mentioned often simple living, high thinking.
Yes.
So that's what we gotta follow.
Simple living, high thinking. The Varnashram system is not complex. It's intricate and in-depth, but it's simple. 4 and 4. 4 classes, 4 ashrams. And then of course, simple living, high thinking, and then of course, one of his famous lines, what is the difficulty? So simply by just keeping everything nice and simple, following the orders of the spiritual master, that's how you achieve perfection in society, and that's how society becomes Krishna conscious. And then this is ultimately the lesson that Yudhisthira Maharaj takes in as Narada Muni is narrating to it. And he was able to peacefully rule the kingdom, and then pass it on to Parikshit Maharaj, who is now also hearing the narration of this that his grandfather once heard. So it's like he's hearing it for a second time. So with that, I believe I will go ahead and end as we're getting ready soon, unless anyone has any last minute questions, comments, concerns, anything at all. So we're all ready to give up everything and move to the cow fields, right?
We'll
Yes.
get there.
We'll get there. Well, nice. Yes.
How do we deal with people that don't really believe in like a moral right or wrong? Because you were saying there's no superiority, but there are people that dwell in low vibrational activities and thoughts, and these are the people that are coming up in the world to like to run it.
Yeah.
It's like if we like, for example, like people that like frequent clubbing or whatever. There's people that are out drinking, shaking booty, doing drugs right now, while we're all over here trying to better ourselves. How do we get them to?
Yeah. That's so. Sometimes you have to understand that you are not in charge of someone else's life. They are. Ultimately, you share with what you have, but you're not gonna prod if you know that it's just going in one ear out the other ear. Some cases you just have to accept that someone is not at the stage yet, mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, to understand this, and that is okay. Remember, Krishna gives us multiple lives over and over again. Simply by association, or even hearing the vibration, they may not, the holy name, they may not get it in this life, but perhaps in the next life. So it's just understanding that some things literally take time, and sometimes that time is lifetime after lifetime. So it's okay that not everyone will accept it right away.
Could I add something? I know something that like Srila Prabhupada, he always says, or that we should be acharyas, and acharya is somebody who's following this practice sincerely, and when a quality of an acharya is they lead by example. And so you can't control somebody else's actions so much, but you can control your own. And you can see with a lot of devotees, like just their influence, purely like them just minding their own business, them doing their practice sincerely, it has that influence on other people and encourages them to practice sincerely. So just be the best you can be in your own practices and try your best. And even though you might not be able to like actively like reach out to them, maybe your influence will be like, oh, maybe I should go vegetarian or do something like that, you know? And it's,
Baby steps.
yeah.
So that's also why, if you ever come into that situation and you still want to try something, go to the higher taste. It is the easiest, best way to get to someone is through their palate, through their tongue.
Prashadam.
Prashadam is always the one thing that is usually surefire. So with that, we'll go ahead and open up the temple room floor for Arti. Thank you all so much.